The fight is on. It's a struggle for the narrative of world history. Which way is it going to go? I'm seeing action on climate change in these last 4 years that is remarkably accelerated beyond what I would have thought. So that one little factoid here is that all the dates in Ministry for the Future are quite wrong. Things I had happening in the 2040s have actually already happened. The acceleration, I have to say, has also included bad things as well as good things. The disasters of climate change have speeded up. The severity of the danger, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, emissions continue to rise on an annual basis rather than fall, so we haven't hit peak emissions. And in this next decade or so, as the problems get more severe, floods, fires, drought, maybe hunger, the tendency to react both negatively with denial and positively with cooperation and shared effort on a shared front. They're both going to be coming together. This sense of being in a race where the bad and the good are both accelerating is really, I think, the story of the 2020s. Technology is a software for civilization that you would call governance. AI can help in a ChatGPT-3 way to write up a synthesis document, a form of prospective legislation. And then the legislatures, having already approved and commissioned this whole project, fast track a look at that legislation. So I called this rapid response governance. And this is a technologically boosted innovation. You need to keep that in mind and keep that in our discussions. Hostile, malignant agent takes over the governance system, then no matter how many good things are going on, it can be perverted from the top. We'll see how that plays out in these next couple of years. We are going to be in a carbon dioxide overshoot. Every means ever suggested will probably be tried out to draw down CO2. The artificial means by way of machinery and kind of vacuum cleaners of the air are being developed, and they are cumbersome, and it would involve an awful lot of machinery, and yet it can be done. During the CO2 overshoot, things might get so hot that some runaway effects may be triggered that we won't be able to cope with. So there will become a sudden necessity of cooling things down temporarily, even if that's not the solution to the underlying CO2 problem, such as solar radiation management. Oftentimes, various different technologies are bundled under the term geoengineering as if they were somehow similar, because they are all technologies of desperation, trying to modify or mitigate the overheating of the planet that might lead to runaway effects that we can never deal with at all. If you'd written this in 2019, it would have looked like a science fiction, and in fact, it's really happening. Governance for each one of these is indeed right at the top of the list of issues. There was a group in Geneva that was trying to get the UN and all other governmental bodies to consider solar radiation management. How would we decide? Who would decide? And then how would it proceed? These need to be talked about just as much as the physical mechanisms. So it all needs to be discussed in an open, transparent fashion, and the whole story put out on the table in advance. And so what interests me is this is a science fiction story in that it's a story set in the future. It's a what if. If we were to do this, what would be the ramifications? European Union is an experiment in governance itself, where nation states become member states of a larger organization that actually has legal teeth to it to regulate the whole. So the individual nation states have given up on some sovereignty for something that is worth more than that in the larger picture. And although it isn't the biggest political power on the planet, it is one of the biggest 3 or 4, and it's more advanced in its political structure because it is a union of nation states. The EU has to take the lead and be the model of cooperation for the greater good that modifies one's own internal politics. I'm not saying that it is the shining model for everything, but it certainly is, the tip of the spear in terms of hitting at certain problems. the idea that we have planetary boundaries, as Johann Rockström put it, and that model that reality cannot be finessed, trifled with, or traduced without reality biting back, so that eventually these really fantasy novel ideologies of power and lack of responsibility, as if we don't live on a biosphere that keeps us alive, that's all going to have to go away. And as it goes away, internationalism will win out over local tribalisms. If we actually were to get our act together here on Earth and became a sane and sustainable long-term civilization, things could get quite prosperous here. I'm encouraged that there are groups working on this. You're onto something important that is nevertheless difficult to explain. It's creating that public trust. That's really an important project right now.